Welcome to Sleep Comes Late. These are calm, unsettling stories for sleepless nights. Nothing too scary, just enough to keep you listening until you drift off. Turn your screen brightness down, get comfortable, and let the day fall away. Let's begin. Mara chose a place that looked easy to explain. A small coastal town on an island, stone houses, narrow lanes, clean water, the kind of destination that sounded responsible when people asked where she was going. Just a quiet week by the sea, she told her co-workers, and they nodded as if that was the whole point of travel, to leave and return without incident. It was her first solo trip. That detail made everything feel louder than it should have. At the airport, she stood in line with her passport in her hand and watched other people move in pairs and clusters. Families corralling children, couples sharing earbuds, friends laughing too hard at the coffee shop. She kept checking her phone, even though nothing new was happening on it. She was trying to hold on to something familiar while her body learned, slowly, that no one else was responsible for her schedule. When the plane landed, heat met her in the doorway like a hand on her shoulder. The air smelled of sun-warmed pavement and salt, and beyond the terminal windows, the sea was a pale sheet with bright seams where the light caught it. A ferry took her the rest of the way. The harbor was busy but not frantic. People moved with the unhurried certainty of locals who knew the boat would leave when it left. Mara stood at the rail and watched the mainland loosen behind them. Buildings thinned, hills softened, the water darkened to a blue that felt serious. On the island, the town looked like a handful of stone thrown gently toward the shore. A bell tower rose above the roofs. Boats bumped quietly in the marina, their ropes creaking in a slow rhythm that sounded almost like speech. Her guest house was up a slope from the water, reached by steps worn in the middle from centuries of feet. The address led her through an archway into a small courtyard where a fig tree leaned over a table and chair. The shade under it was cool and green. A woman came out from inside as Mara set her suitcase down. She was older, her hair pinned loosely, her face calm in a way that made Mara's own nervous energy feel childish. She wore an apron, and her hands smelled faintly of soap. "You're Mara," the woman said, as if they'd spoken already. "Welcome, I'm Ivana." Mara nodded too quickly. "Yes, hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little early." Ivana smiled, not the kind of smile that tries to make you feel better, but the kind that assumes you'll figure yourself out in time. "Early is fine," she said. "The room is ready. Come." Inside, the guest house was quiet in a deep, structural way. The walls were thick stone, and the air held a coolness that felt preserved. It smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Ivana led her up a narrow staircase. The room was simple, a bed with a white coverlet, a small desk by the window, a wardrobe that looked older than the building's electrical wiring. Through the window, Mara could see the sea between rooftops, a glinting strip of movement. On the desk was a small notebook and a pencil, placed as neatly as if they were part of the furniture. "What's this?" Mara asked. Ivana looked at it as if she'd forgotten it was there. "For you, if you like," she said. "People write. Not everyone, but many do." Mara flipped the notebook open. The first page had a date, years ago, and a few lines in tidy handwriting. The next page had a different date, a different hand. Some pages were in English, some in languages Mara didn't recognize. Most entries were short, observations, thank yous, descriptions of weather, food, sleep, but almost all of them ended with the same phrase, "Leave a light." Mara's eyes went back over it, once, twice, as if the repetition might rearrange itself into a different meaning. Ivana watched her without obvious interest. "It's a habit," she said. "Not a rule. People like to feel they've participated." "Leave a light," Mara repeated, uncertain. Ivana nodded. "In the window, at night, a small one, not bright." Mara laughed softly because she didn't know what else to do. "Okay. If you forget," Ivana said, still calm, "it is not a disaster, but you'll remember. Everyone does." Mara set her bag down, washed her face, changed into lighter clothes. She told herself the notebook was charming, an old-town quirk, something that would make a nice detail in a message to a friend. Still, the phrase stayed in her mind as she walked back down the steps into the courtyard and out into the town. The streets were a pleasant puzzle. Laundry hung between windows like flags. Cats slept under benches. A baker pulled trays from an oven, and the air filled with warm bread and citrus. Mara wandered without a plan. That was part of the reason she'd come. To move through a place alone and discover that nothing collapsed because of it. In the late afternoon, she sat at a cafe by the marina and ordered grilled fish and a cold drink. The waiter brought it with the casual competence of someone who assumed she knew how to exist. As she ate, she watched the boats come and go. A man mended a net at the edge of the dock, his fingers moving steadily, never looking up. Two teenagers jumped into the water with loud splashes and resurfaced laughing, water sliding off their shoulders. It was peaceful. It was exactly what she had pictured. And yet she kept noticing light, not the sun, though the sun was everywhere, turning stone into gold and making the water look like it had depth beyond physics, but light in the way people spoke about it and moved around it. Several homes had small lanterns mounted beside their doors, even in daylight. A few windows had candles sitting on their sills, as if waiting. That evening, when she returned to the guest house, Ivana was in the courtyard trimming herbs. "You had a good day?" Ivana asked. "Yes," Mara said. "It's very beautiful." Ivana nodded, as if beauty was a minor feature, like good plumbing. "At sunset," Ivana said. "If you like, you can walk to the lighthouse path. It's safe. Just follow the white stones. Don't go too close to the edge." Mara looked up. "There's a lighthouse?" "Yes." Ivana's hands kept working. "It is old. It still works, but not like before." "What does that mean?" Ivana paused, considering whether to explain. Then she shrugged, as if the right words didn't matter much. "It's there," she said. "People look. Sometimes people think. That's all." After a shower, Mara found a small lamp in the room, an old glass base with a warm bulb, not harsh. She turned it on and placed it on the window ledge. It felt silly and slightly childish, like doing a ritual you didn't believe in. But it also felt harmless, and she wasn't in the mood to resist harmless things. When she stepped back, the lamp made a small square of glow visible from the street below. A quiet signal. She went down and followed the lighthouse path at dusk. The white stones Ivana mentioned were embedded in the ground at intervals, guiding the way through low shrubs and patches of wild grass. The air cooled quickly as the sun dropped. The sea went from bright blue to something deeper and more serious. Far out, a thin line of clouds gathered, pale as chalk. The lighthouse stood at the end of the path, its stone base mottled and weathered, its lantern room capped in metal that caught the last of the sun. There were people there, not a crowd, but enough that Mara had to adjust her pace. A few couples leaned on the low wall. An older man stood with his hands behind his back, staring out. A woman held a child who was asleep against her shoulder. No one spoke loudly. It wasn't that talking was forbidden, it just didn't seem to fit. Mara found a place near the edge, still a safe distance back, and looked out at the water. She listened to it, the long inhale and exhale against the rocks below. The sound was steady, comforting, and yet it contained a stubbornness, as if the sea would keep doing this long after people had stopped watching. A small bell rang inside the lighthouse, faint but distinct. The older man beside her turned his head slightly, not to look at her, but as if acknowledging something he'd been waiting for. The lantern in the lighthouse did not blaze into life dramatically. It brightened slowly, a warm circle growing until it was a steady, patient beam. It swept out over the water in a slow rotation, and as it did, Mara noticed something along the town behind them. Windows began to glow. not all at once, and not in a synchronized way that would have looked performative. One here, two there, then another. Small lamps, candles, lanterns. The town, which had been a silhouette against the darkening sky, gained scattered pockets of warmth. The effect was unexpectedly intimate, not festive, not loud, just present. Mara felt her throat tighten, but she couldn't have said why. On the path back, she walked behind two women who spoke quietly in a language she didn't know. Their voices were soft and even. One of them laughed, a brief sound like a pebble tossed into water. Back in her room, the lamp was still on in the window. Mara left it there as she went to bed. She slept deeply. The next day was bright and ordinary. Mara took a small tour boat around the island with a few other tourists. She swam in a cove where the water was clear enough to see the pale shape of her feet beneath her. She ate an ice cream on the harbor and let it melt faster than she could keep up with. At dinner, she sat alone again. This time, she felt less conspicuous. Being alone in public had started to feel like a neutral fact rather than a statement. That night, she left the lamp in the window again. On the third day, a storm rolled in from the sea. It wasn't violent, but it was persistent. Gray clouds thickening, wind worrying the shutters, rain arriving in sheets that made the stone streets shine. Most of the town retreated indoors. Mara spent the afternoon in her room with a book, the sound of rain tapping and streaming down the glass. It was cozy in the way she'd hoped travel would be, contained, self-sufficient, quiet. In the evening, when the rain eased into a drizzle, she went downstairs to find Ivana in the kitchen, slicing bread. "You're not bored?" Ivana asked, as if that was the only danger. "No," Mara said. "It's kind of nice." Ivana gave her a look that was nearly amused. "You're learning." Mara hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What's with the leave a light thing?" Mara tried to sound casual. "Is it some tradition?" Ivana set the knife down and wiped her hands on her apron. "It is old," she said. "Before the lighthouse had electricity, before it had even kerosene, people put lamps in windows during storms. The fishermen could see the town. It helped. It made them feel not alone." Mara nodded. That made sense. That was even sweet. "But the lighthouse works now," Mara said. "And people still do it." "Yes," Ivana said, "because it is not only for boats." Mara waited. Ivana's expression didn't change, but her voice softened. "Sometimes it is for people," she said. "Sometimes someone walks at night. Sometimes someone doesn't know where to go. A light is a small thing, but small things matter." Mara thought of her own arrival, her nervousness, the sense of being unanchored. She thought of how good it felt to see warm windows from the lighthouse path. "Does something happen if you don't?" Mara asked. Ivana shook her head. "Nothing mystical," she said, as if she'd heard the question before and found it slightly annoying. "No curse, no punishment, only this. If you don't leave it, you won't be seen, and perhaps one day you will wish to be seen." The rain started again, soft and steady. Mara watched it through the kitchen window. That night, she left the lamp on. On the fourth day, she noticed a man. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't lurking. He was simply present in a way she couldn't stop registering. She saw him first in the morning near the bakery. He stood across the street, hands in his coat pockets, looking at the ocean as if it had asked him a question. He looked up briefly when Mara came out with a paper bag of pastries, and then looked away. Later, she saw him again near the marina. He walked slowly along the edge of the dock, not in the way someone strolls for pleasure, but in the way someone moves because staying still makes things worse. That evening, she saw him at the edge of the lighthouse path. He wasn't walking toward it. He was standing at the start of it, as if deciding whether to go. Mara told herself there was nothing alarming about a man existing in the same small town. Her mind was simply more alert because she was alone. She had no one to check her perceptions against. And yet, something about him made her feel cautious. Not fear, exactly. More like the awareness you get when you realize you've been leaving your door unlocked lately. Back at the guest house, she mentioned it lightly to Ivana as Ivana watered plants in the courtyard. "There's a man," Mara said, trying not to sound ridiculous. "I keep seeing him around." Ivana didn't look up. "Yes," she said. "He is here." Mara paused. "Do you know him?" Ivana's hand steadied on the watering can. "He is not a danger," she said. Mara waited, surprised by the certainty. Ivana finally looked at her. "He is a person who arrived when he should not have arrived," Ivana said carefully. "He came when the ferry stopped for storms. It stopped only once. The captain made an exception. The man had nowhere else. And now he's stuck?" Mara asked. Ivana shrugged. "He can leave. He does not." Something about that made Mara's skin tighten. The idea of staying in a place because leaving felt impossible, even when it wasn't. Mara thought of the empty streets in the rain, the way the town became a small world when the weather closed in. "Why doesn't he leave?" she asked. Ivana's eyes were steady. "He is waiting for someone," she said. "Or he is waiting to stop waiting. Those things look similar from outside." That night, Mara left the lamp on as usual, but she pulled the curtains slightly, not to hide, just to soften the room's exposure. She woke sometime after midnight. The rain had stopped. The world outside was still, as if the storm had drained the air of motion. She lay still, listening. No wind, no voices, only the faint, constant sound of sea against rock. Then she heard footsteps, not inside her room. Outside, in the street below. Slow, measured steps, as if someone was walking without urgency. The sound moved along the stones, then paused. Mara sat up, heart waking faster than the rest of her body. She didn't want to look out the window. Looking felt like participation, and she wasn't sure she wanted to participate. But the lamp in her window made the room glow, and she felt exposed without seeing what she was exposed to. She moved quietly to the window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to look down. The street was empty except for the man she'd noticed. He stood beneath her window, not directly under it, but near enough that her lamp spilled a faint pool of light around him. His face was tilted upward, but not toward her specifically, more toward the light itself, as if it were a thing he could consult. He didn't wave, he didn't call. He didn't do anything that would have allowed her to label this as harassment or danger. He just stood there, breathing in the night, letting the light touch him. Then he turned and walked away, the sound of his steps fading along the street until it was gone. Mara stood at the window for a long time after that, waiting for her nervous system to accept that nothing else was happening. In the morning, she felt embarrassed. She told herself she'd overreacted. He'd probably been walking because he couldn't sleep. She had done the same thing at home, sometimes, on nights when her mind wouldn't settle. Still, she didn't mention it to Ivana. She didn't want to turn it into a story with rules. On her last evening, the sky cleared. The sunset was clean and bright, the kind that made people stop mid-sentence and look. The sea reflected it like polished metal. Mara walked to the lighthouse again. More people were there this time, and they talked softly, like a gathering at a memorial rather than a tourist spot. The bell rang inside the lighthouse. The lantern brightened and began its slow rotation. As the beam swept out, windows in town began to glow, one by one, a familiar pattern, gentle and human. Mara stood and watched it. A presence appeared beside her, not close enough to be intimate, but close enough that she could feel another person's warmth in the cooling air. It was the man. He didn't look at her. He looked at the sea. After a few minutes, he spoke quietly, as if to himself. "Thank you," he said. Mara didn't respond. She didn't know if the thanks was meant for her. It didn't feel like it belonged to a conversation. The man continued in the same calm tone. "She used to leave a light," he said. "My wife. She said it was a silly thing, but she did it every storm." Mara swallowed, uncertain where to put her attention. The sea, the lighthouse, the man's voice. "She died before I could stop being angry about stupid things," he said, still not looking at her. "Now I come here and I watch other people do it. It helps." Mara's throat tightened again, but this time she understood why. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. The man nodded once, as if that was enough. After a moment, he stepped back and walked away along the path, his figure shrinking into the darkening hillside. Mara watched him go until she couldn't see him anymore. That night, she packed her suitcase. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the notebook on the desk. She hadn't written in it yet. She opened to a blank page and wrote the date. Her handwriting looked strange in the lamplight. She wrote a few lines about the town, the sea smell, the stone steps, the bell in the lighthouse. Then she paused, thinking of what the light meant here. Not a warning, not a message, not a superstition, just a small choice to be visible. At the bottom, she wrote, "Leave a light." In the morning, she checked out early. Ivana hugged her briefly, as if they were relatives who had decided to be kind to each other. "Safe travels," Ivana said. Mara hesitated. "Do you think?" she started, then stopped, unsure what she was asking. Ivana seemed to understand anyway. "You came alone," Ivana said. "You leave with yourself. That is the point." Mara smiled, and it felt real. On the ferry back, she stood at the rail again and watched the island pull away. The lighthouse was a thin, pale line on the cliff. That night, back in her apartment at home, she unpacked slowly. The rooms felt familiar and slightly too quiet. Before she went to bed, she found a small lamp and placed it in her own window. It was not for boats. It was not for storms. It was for the simple fact that she had been somewhere she didn't know, and someone else had been there too, and neither of them had needed more than a light to understand something important. She turned it on and let it glow, and in the glass, she could see her own reflection, steady, present, not disappearing at all. If you're still awake, that's okay. These stories tend to linger. Take a deep breath. Let the quiet return. And if you enjoyed listening, there are more nights like this ahead. Good night.